Dude, Nintendo, what's so interesting about Nintendo is they have absolutely branded themselves as the family-friendly company, blah, blah, blah. They are the most litigious and money-hungry out of all of them. So, let's get into hearing what Yang Ya has to say about Nintendo, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Nintendo, of course.
Game keycards continue to plague the conversation surrounding the Nintendo Switch 2, and it really is a damn shame because people really thought that Nintendo was one of the last bastions of taking games preservation and physical media seriously, with Switch 2 continuing to use cartridges, but then they introduced the concept of game keycards, which you can see right here, a summary that basically describes this as physical media that requires a digital download. It is physical media that doesn't have all the game data in it. The card itself just...
So basically like everybody else has been doing. So Nintendo was just, 10 years behind of a lot of other like that. I will say this, and I know this because my buddy purchased it on Xbox. Expedition 33. Clair Obscure Expedition 33. The entire game was on the disc. My buddy was like, I cannot believe this. This is insane. So, if anybody wants to know why I freaking love that game so much, it's not just because it had an absolutely incredible plot and really good gameplay, but also because they respected game players well enough to just say the whole game is on the disc. Here you go.
Serves as a key to access the downloaded digital product, but the card itself does not contain the necessary files to play the game, so you might as well just buy the game digitally, as that at least offers the convenience of not having to...
Why don't we get a discount for buying stuff digitally? Anybody else want to wonder that? I remember for a long time they were saying, no, you got to buy digital games because digital games will be cheaper than physical ones, but they haven't been. The game key card controversy is an example of what I was saying. It's what everyone else has done, but no one cared, or at least there was no outrage. Very, very true.
Carry around physical media, with the only advantage being the ability to lend the game to somebody. But as far as like keeping the game forever and feeling like you own the game is concerned, none of that is present here. And it goes without saying that people are really not fans of that, especially enthusiasts and, gamers who are really into the hobby, who understand the importance of games preservation and how physical media ultimately empowers that. So many launch titles on the...
And the reason that it does is... The reason that it empowers people is because, again, there's a sense of ownership. And Legendary Drops did a fantastic video a few weeks back and really defined the language that they're using in the gaming world between players and purchasers. And what we're seeing right now is a very, very big fight on, well, stop killing games and just in the digital media front to actually be able to say, no. When I give you money for a thing, I deserve to keep that thing. You can't just take it away from me. Digital, physical doesn't matter. I give you money, you give me the thing, you don't have a right to take it, because they really, and it doesn't make any sense why the games industry is doing this, because it has only provided them negative backlash for taking games away from people that they've already paid for. It makes no sense. The AAA gaming industry has absolutely only received negative backlash for removing content that we paid for. But for some reason, they think that this is the move that they need to do. Well, we need to fight copyright. We need to fight all this stuff. And it's so stupid. The backlash hasn't kept people from buying, so they don't care. Very true. Very true. You're not wrong.
The Nintendo Switch 2 and so many upcoming releases will be game key cards. You can see right here one list among many that you'll find online. Now, Nintendo is releasing all of their games in regular game cards. All of the first-party releases so far have all been housed within the physical media, including the most recent Donkey Kong Bonanza, and a handful of third-party games, particularly the Switch 2 edition stuff, is coming out on regular game cards, and CD Projekt itself is an exception in that they managed to fit the massive game that is Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition, which includes the DLC, in a full game card.
Wait, is that the female version of Bastard? Bastiettes? Wait, what? Is that the feminine of the... Wow! I didn't know that makes sense. I did not know that there was a feminine Bong Donkey, what's going on, guys? Ow, you're all here. It's wonderful to see you. Do me a favor, share this out for me, as always, because I'm not on Twitter anymore. I made it up. I'm okay with you making up words. I'm fine with it. It's totally fine. It makes total sense.
And not made it a game key card. But that aside, the vast majority of third-party games are game key cards, which is really disappointing to see. And look, this is nothing new. A lot of physical versions of games these days don't house all of the game data. And you've got companies like Ubisoft in particular who release physical editions of games and still require essentially a download, a little patch that serves as a...
Dude, this is what most games require. It's a like and share. Thank you, Tank Ferret. Dude, this is what's so interesting is I've been purchasing games. I always try to get the discs and stuff. Most game data since the PlayStation 4 has come out has not been on the disc. And I kind of realized a while back that for a lot of purchasing games, it's why I'm just on Steam now. Because I realized that having a console, having the disc, doesn't matter anymore. And I freaking hate it. I want to go back to local downloads. I really do. And it's just, dude, it's what we were talking about for a long time with physical ownership versus digital ownership. It's why when all of you guys shared your indie projects with me for multiple years, I always told people, don't buy the digital. I understand the physical is more expensive. I understand, but buy the physical versions. Because God forbid some of our favorite indie guys and some of the people who we believe in, piss off the powers that be, you can still have the book that they made. Versus if you buy it digitally, they just go, oh, we're just going to, because it's not a local download anymore. It's always stored on the cloud because that makes fucking sense.
Key to unlock the game, so it renders the physical media useless in the form that you would anticipate it to be in. But seeing how prominent proper physical media was on the Nintendo Switch 1 and seeing this transition towards game key cards and giving that option to publishers to essentially give players the short end of the stick as far as physical media is concerned, is just really unfortunate. And it's only going to further fuel the bad habit that the games industry has of not preserving games and not giving players a certain sense of ownership over the media that they own. And the unfortunate thing is that even months...
And this is why... And this is one of the areas that I wish Yang Yao would be a little bit more... Have some more teeth in, right? I absolutely think that he should be saying... Not that they're not giving players that, that ownership... is that they're stealing from players. I gave you my money. I have a right to purchase that thing, to buy that thing, to keep it. When he soft pitches this, he's like, oh, well, they're not giving players ownership. No, you're stealing. It's theft. What they're doing is theft. I gave you money for a product. We discussed this a few weeks back. You can't even look at the end user license agreements that tell you that you don't own the product until after you hand over your money. How can you agree to a legal contract that you don't even know about until after you hand over your money? You can't. There are consumer protection laws in the US that say if you're going to agree to a legal contract, it has to be that you agree to that contract before you hand over your money. And yet the games industry has, for however many years now, been violating that. So when he's like, well, they're not really like preserving games, they're not, like giving like players ownership. No. They're stealing. Yongya needs to get some teeth. I do like a lot of the stories that he covers, and I listen to him more because he covers some things that a lot of other people don't. But I wish he would get a little more aggressive on some of this against these companies, and I don't know why he doesn't. I'm not sure if it's because he wants favorability with companies. I don't think that's what it is. I think this is because this is the way that he's just done it for so long. It's just muscle memory for him at this point. Mike is bad news. As someone who works for a software company, I can tell you that it's not exclusively up the game industry. I agree. Well, he's a voice actor. He wants a job. That could be it. I genuinely, because he's been presenting like this for a very long time. And keep in mind, he came up and he got very popular during a time when cancellation on YouTube was huge. Cancel culture was absolutely massive when he was coming up. And so a lot of people who wanted to be successful and maintain their jobs kind of had to tiptoe around the tulips for these fuckers. And once you do that enough, it just kind of becomes a cadence. That's just kind of how you do it, right? And I have noticed that he has become a lot more critical of AAA and of these bad business practices lately, but he's still not there yet, in my personal opinion.
After launch, game key cards continue to plague the third-party scene. But before we get to that, speaking of bad habits, that brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Fume, a company dedicated to helping people transition out of and replace habits like vaping and similar activities with a harmless alternative. This is an innovative, award-winning device that imitates the motions and actions of bad habits akin to a placebo while taking out all of the bad elements. Protect the tip of the device.
I am actually interested in this product myself, but it's kind of expensive for a one-time buy, but then again, could save you a lot of money in the future if you're looking to kick a bad habit.
For free. All right, so let's talk about ways in which the game key card format continues to plague the conversation surrounding the Nintendo Switch.
He comes across as more of a straight-up reporter. Kind of.
Two.
Okay,
starting
that's fair.
With the recent Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase from July 31st, 2025. This was focused on third-party releases, and as you might have guessed, a lot of these releases in the physical format will be in the form of game key cards. In fact, there are plenty of articles highlighting how fans felt severely underwhelmed and disappointed at the number of game showcase that will be game key cards, and plenty of posts on social media like this right here from Genki saying Nintendo Game Key Card Partner Showcase, highlighting how many of the highly anticipated third-party games and ports for the Nintendo Switch 2, like Octopath Traveler 0, Persona 3 Reload, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and Pac-Man World Repack 2 are all going to be housed in game key cards that defeat the whole purpose of physical media for the most part. And what's strange about these games in particular, as Genki highlights here, is that all of them are under 64 gigabytes, so they can fit in the card. Like, it'd be one thing if these game files were so big that they just literally cannot fit in a regular game card, but these absolutely can. And so it makes this decision that spits in the face of physical.
Yeah, and this is the problem, is the games industry does not have an argument here as to why they can't put it on the key card. That's why they can't just let you have that copy of the thing and have some version of the game for when online services go down. They don't have a good argument with, but we have to protect our IP. It's like, but I have a game from 20 years ago that you made that I can still plop into a console and play today, and that doesn't threaten your IP. So why does this? The decision to go with cartridges, I think, is part of the issue. I don't, because, I mean, does anybody remember the old school, like Nintendo, like Super Nintendo cartridges, the Sega Genesis cartridges, the Nintendo 64 cartridges? I mean, cartridges used to be the way that they did it. The disc just so happened to be the way to go. It wasn't until like USB, storage and stuff like that actually became better that they kind of went back to that, because even Nintendo went to disc for a while. But I really like USB cartridges. I actually like the cartridge thing more. It's easier to save. You could get a booklet. If you could have all your games and just put them all in a little booklet and just flip, way better on storage. Everybody go, and a lot of people make this argument that but like, where are you going to keep all these discs? Where are you going to keep all of these discs that you have, and the disc, what are the disc cases that they come? Discs are still cheaper, vastly cheaper. Discs are vastly cheaper. Of course they are. But again, there's no good argument as to why they're not just putting the games on the freaking thing and just letting us have them. It doesn't. None of this makes any sense. I think they're trying to change the market in a way that none of us want and haven't wanted for a long time.
Media enthusiasts, just all the more baffling and all the more disappointing. I mean, when Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition can be all fit into a 64 gigabyte game card, there is no excuse for games like these to not be able to do the same, given that that is a much less complicated process, as these game files are not as big as Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition. If CD Projekt is capable of pulling this off, then so can all these third-party entities. Now, what it all ultimately comes down to is this being a cost-cutting measure. As Daniel Ahmad explains here, 64 gigabyte game cards are significantly more expensive than discs for game makers, so you have to price games above 60. It's just cheaper for game companies to release games digitally and to put their games in the game key cards that are not high capacity, high storage, and cheapen out that way just to be able to have better margins for each game sale. But my counter argument to that is that you should just price the physical editions at a higher price point to make up for that difference, to make up for the lower margins. Like, I'm willing to pay a little extra to make up for that cost if it means that I get to own an object that I can just...
Okay, and this right here is where we do not want to go as customers, because I almost want to agree with him. I almost want to agree with Yang Ya that I would be willing to pay a little bit more to have the key card or the disc with the physical game on it, so that way I can have it forever. However, I feel like that puts us back into the slippery slope stuff. We used to just pay for the game on physical. Here's where I'm at. I think if you want to say that the standard price for games is now $80, then that game needs to come on the disc or the cartridge or a flash drive or whatever. But the digital version of that needs to be cheaper. The digital version needs to be $10, $15 cheaper, right? And honestly, if you pay for, let's say you pay for the game's $80. If you get the disc, you get to keep it forever. The caveat is if you pay $15 less, then they go, this is a digital version of a game. It's supported digitally. We can decide to not support it forever. And so if you don't buy the physical edition of the game, you know, you're going to get you're going to get it at a discount of $15, but that's at the risk of us taking it back from you one of these days. Is that a fair trade-off? I don't know. I still don't think so. I still think $80 is way too much. Dude, I think $60 is too much for a game. You know, but there needs to be some version of a compromise here. And I think that this is obviously what Stop Killing Games is going for, and we need to figure this out. This the fact that we as customers have accepted this for as long as we have is stupid.
Insert, plug, and play. Obviously, there's going to be patches and stuff to download, but as long as there's some version of the game that I can play from that cartridge without having to depend on service providers, you know, being up and running and having the required patches to be able to run the game, as long as I can run the game in some way, shape, or form through a physical media.
But this is what I'm talking about, is that the standard price, we should not be paying more than the standard price of the game for the physical edition. No. We don't pay more than the standard price for the physical edition. Sorry. I've got windows popping in and out here.
Yeah, that I own, like, I'll be satisfied. And so having that option to pay a little more for a full-fledged...
older games didn't have patches. They were released finished. Some of them were. The ones that were notable were, but no, like things like KOTOR 2. KOTOR 2 was not released finished. In fact, there was a bunch of cut content and there was a whole bunch of stuff behind that. Halo 2 was not released finished. They had to do a whole bunch. Now, it just so happens that Halo 2 slapped so freaking hard that your grandmother felt it. But Halo 2 was actually not released finished. They scrambled to get that thing where it was. And there were levels in that game that were absolutely not finished and just time sinks into that game. But no, games released back on physical were not finished. But yeah, the ability to update a flash drive with the update installation is too easy. Probably, yeah.
Game card for games. Like, to me, that would be an ideal solution. But in general, regular game cards are just more of a hassle for companies, so they want to go the easiest route possible with the least friction. Now, if you're going to go this route, at the very least, be honest about why you're going this route of game key cards. There's some companies trying to justify this as this being good for players, which is just factually and decidedly not true. So among companies putting out a statement about game key cards is NIS America, speaking about Trails Beyond the Horizon for the Nintendo Switch 2, which will be a game key card release. That's been confirmed. And when asked about why they felt the necessity to go this route, why they didn't just put the game in a regular game card, they said the following. A representative, at least, responded with the following statement. We decided to release this title as a game key card on the Nintendo Switch 2 as we believe it was the most beneficial option for our customers.
What?
Explain yourself. The physical media requires you...
Okay, he's right. Yeah, they need to explain that. How in the absolute hell is that the most beneficial option for your customers? That makes zero sense.
To download, which means that when you get the game, you have to spend additional time actually downloading the game before you can dive into it. It's going to take up more storage on your already limited internal storage on your Nintendo Switch 2. You can opt to get a microSD card express, but those right now are really hard to get. They're selling out like crazy, especially the higher storage capacity microSD card expresses. Those are...
That's why. Because they want you to go buy more storage for your Nintendo Switch 2. That's why it's the most beneficial for the customers, because it's the most beneficial for them. Yeah, that makes no fucking sense. God.
Selling out. So storage right now especially is really limited, and so the download requirement means that taking up that extra storage space will be an inconvenience. And then of course there's the element of you get none of the benefits of physical media, where you get to insert the game card and play the game right there and then, and have a sense of autonomy over the product that you bought. That, you know, this is something they cannot take away from you because it's in physical format. You're not dependent on the service providers to maintain servers and to keep them running. Game key cards are actually the least.
And this right here, if they would just put the games on the game cards or on the discs, this solves the entire end-of-life BS that people keep talking about. This solves the entire end-of-life BS that people keep talking about. Just put the game on the card. Then you don't have to solve for that. It's just there. I get to play it.
Official option for customers. They're the worst of both.
But what about live service games? Those are a service, need to be marketed as a service, and need to be priced accordingly.
Both worlds. It's a digital product that still requires the inconvenience of carrying around a physical object that you have to insert into your console, and it's a physical product that requires you to download all of the game data and is still dependent on servers being maintained for you to have ownership over that game. So I don't know where they're getting this idea that game key cards are the most beneficial.
So it's literally the worst option. It is the worst of both worlds. It's the worst of physical, it's the worst of digital, period.
Option for customers. That is a statement that isn't elaborated upon, which means that on some level they know that this is just, you know, an empty statement. And another area where game key cards have plagued the Nintendo Switch 2 scene is in the way that they're not allowing for Switch 1 versions to be upgraded to Switch 2. And in the way that there's...
Mike has bad knees. A game key card is not arguably better than fully digital. It's actually worse. Fully digital, I can just turn a thing on. Yes, they could still take it away from you, but fully digital, I can at least just turn my system on, whatever that is, my computer, my PlayStation, my Xbox, whatever. I can just play the game. If for some reason that game gets taken out, like my kids oftentimes will use our consoles as like just DVD players, right? Pop it, because we have a bunch of DVDs now. So we got like a few hundred. What's going on here, oh Darky Dark? I shouted you out. You can give the card to someone else. You can give the card to someone else. However, under Nintendo's new like EULA, you're not really allowed to do that. Because if they register it somewhere else and it's under somebody else's profile, they can brick the system. It's ridiculous. They're Nintendo's new EULA.
The separation between the physical editions of Switch 1 versions of games and Switch 2 versions of games. As highlighted in scenarios like Octopath Zero here, where in the Nintendo Switch 1 version of the physical media, it is a regular game card where all the game data is housed within the physical media, but the Nintendo Switch 2 version is a game key card. And so what enthusiasts were hoping for is that they could get the Switch 1 version of the game and get a proper physical media and then have an upgrade path towards the Switch 2 version. While it's still not the most ideal way because you still have to download something to get the Switch 2 upgrades, at least you have some kind of physical media that you can use to play the entire game from the game cartridge itself and not be dependent on other companies to have some kind of playable form of the title. But that is something that is not being offered by companies who are releasing their games both on Switch 1 and Switch 2. So, for example, Square Enix confirmed right here that it is not...
And think about this, too. Companies constantly complain about storage, right? And how much storage costs for them. And it's just so much money. Okay, cool. It's so much money for you to store these games on your cloud servers and blah, blah, blah. So then why don't you just put the game on the thing so you as the company do not have to store it and run us up against that storage wall that you have? Just put it on the thing and let me have it in my house. Then you as the company do not have to pay the cost every single month to store that game. You as the company are choosing to hamper yourself, and you are choosing to accept a cost you do not have to accept, because ongoing storage is a cost that you as the company are taking on. When you could just put it on a disk, send it to me, and then guess what? You don't have to pay for the cost of storage for that forever. What a concept. What a concept.
Possible to upgrade from the Switch 1 version to the Switch 2 version once purchased. There are also no plans for an option to upgrade to Switch 2 version in the future. Please make sure you purchase the correct version, which means that if you purchase the Switch 1 version of the game, you are stuck with the lower resolution, the lower performance of the Switch 1 edition. Even if you play it on the Nintendo Switch 2, you do get the physical media, but you're essentially left with a version of the game that doesn't take advantage of the new hardware. And if you get the Switch 2 version, you do get all the enhancements and upgrades that the...
And so this right here is why I'm not a graphics whore. This right here, the constant need to upgrade to the newest and greatest and stuff like that has been sold as a lie to the gaming industry this entire generation. I remember, if you guys go back to the early days of this channel, you'll see where we were talking about 4K 60. You'll see the thumbnail and all that. Me and my buddy Matt were talking about this. And we were wondering about the 4K 60 promise that they were making at the time of this console generation release for the PS4 and the Xbox. What is it? The Series X, sorry. And the Xbox Series systems. And effectively what we have learned now is that they are not even developing games natively in 4K 60. They're not developing them in 4K 30. They're not developing them in what's going on, H-Mall, later Tank Ferret. They're not developing these games in the native resolutions that they said you were going to get. No, instead, they're relying on upscalers and all kinds of stuff that are monkeying with the hardware, taking up processing power, and effectively not working upon release because these games are not being developed at that level. As I talked with my buddy about this for a while, and I told him, I was like, you know, the reason that I don't have 4K monitors or even anything above 1080 monitors is because most games today are being developed in like 1080 30. There are a incredibly small handful of games that are actually being developed in 4K natively. Most games are not being developed there. And we see the amount of hardware issues. We see every time a new game releases, people talk about performance issues because they, in order to run that game at these ultra high, holier than thou, godly fucking, resolutions and frame rates, they have to have multiple different programs running underneath and processing. And guess what? The processors can't even fucking handle it. It's why I tell people 4K is a scam to get you to spend more money. All of these companies talk about how great their game looks in 4K. They're not even developing the game in 4K. How can they tell you the game looks good in 4K when they're not even developing it in 4K? It's because they're hoping that the after post-processing bullshit that NVIDIA is coming up with hopefully makes it work well enough, and then NVIDIA can't even get their coding correctly enough to get the game to present itself to you at a stable frame rate, at a stable resolution. It's ridiculous, dude. Boom, shakalaka. What's going on? Mayor of Work City. By the way, The Rundown was a great movie. Sean William Scott, The Rock, go check it out. It's awesome.
Switch 2 version features, but you don't get all the game files in the cartridge. You get that game key card. So there's no option to get both. There's this separation that feels woefully unnecessary to me. And the same applies for Trails Beyond the Horizon. Fans were hoping that wouldn't be the case, but Nintendo Life asked NIS America if there is a possibility to upgrade from the Switch 1 version to the Switch 2 version, because like Octopath Traveler 0, Trails Beyond the Horizon has a Switch 1 version that is a regular game card and a Switch 2 version that is a game key card. But NIS America was unable to confirm whether Trails Beyond the Horizon will have a Switch 1 to...
because that takes money from them. That takes money from them. It's part of the reason that Ghost of Tsushima was one of my favorite games to ever come out, because they released somewhat cross-platform. They were like right at it was one of the last games released on the PlayStation 4 before the PlayStation 5 came out. And you know what they said? If you owned the PlayStation 4 version and you got a PlayStation 5, they would for just $10 extra, you would get the upgrade to PlayStation 5 with the better graphics, the 60 FPS performance, and all this crap that came with the PlayStation 5 with the better hardware. I love companies that do that. I think it's fantastic when companies are like, "Oh, you already own our game, but there's newer hardware out. Well, don't worry, we're going to take care of you guys. Just it's good, for $10 extra, to transfer from one system to the other and get all the, get the upgraded graphics and stuff like that. You're good to go." Nintendo right here is saying, "Oh, no. Oh, you gave us $50 for that game? You gave us $60 for that game? No. You're not going to get a Switch 2 upgrade for $10. What you're going to do, if you want to play that game, is you're going to give us another $70. You're going to give us another $60. But I originally bought the game for $50. Doesn't matter. The Switch 2 version is going to cost you an extra $70. It's like, but I paid $50 for the original game. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, PayPig. Doesn't matter, Nintendo PayPig. Get your fucking oink oink nose on. It's fucking dumb, dude. But that's exactly what they're doing.
Switch 2 upgrade path. Now, this is not them shutting down the possibility entirely, but this is not something they're actively working on either. And I would bet that it's not something they're going to ultimately implement. I think there is going to be that separation between the Switch 1 physical edition and the Switch 2 physical edition with this title as well. And you got a similar situation with Sonic Shadow Generations, as posted here by Speeding in the Mania, where they report how it's been confirmed that this is a game key card title for the Nintendo Switch 2, and it's not upgradable from the Switch 1 version, whose physical media does house the full game files inside the cartridge.
Why
it reads right here, give us a free up.
Why? Because you need to spend your money. Royce's pig nose bigoted confirmed. Fuck yeah, I am.
Great patch, Sega, for those who bought this game not even a year ago. Let them know this isn't acceptable. So that's another area where game key cards are being criticized, where Switch 1 versions of those games can house all the game data inside the cartridge, but with a Switch 2 version, they opted for game key cards, and that separation means that upgrade paths are really limited. And so, as more time goes by, the detriments of game key cards are becoming more glaringly obvious. And it's something that numerous entities have spoken out about, including, CEOs of game companies. So right here we have Stephen Kick, CEO of remaster specialist Night Dive Studios, who said, speaking to gamesindustry.biz, seeing Nintendo do this is a little disheartening in regards to game key cards. You would hope that a company that big, that has such a storied history, would take preservation a little more seriously. Even shareholders brought up concerns during a recent shareholders meeting, as reported.
Yes, pay pigs, H-Mall. Those are basically people who are so... a pig is oftenly referring to somebody who is very gluttonous, right? A pay pig is somebody who is willing to pay extra money because they're so gluttonous over something that they're willing to hand over their hard-earned money regardless of any moral value that they hold, right? That's a pay pig. They did upgrades for the Zelda games. Mike has bad knees. Can you rephrase that for me?
Here by gamesindustry.biz. The article reports that shareholders also expressed apprehension regarding game key cards, and Nintendo's response, specifically Furukawa, the CEO, said that they're continuing to work closely with publishers to support the various distribution methods offered on the Nintendo Switch 2, which is a very non-answer. That doesn't say anything about all the concerns surrounding that format. And he continues,
We're working with developers, not customers. Developers, not customers. And guess what? If you want to be on Nintendo's platform, you know what you're going to do? What Nintendo tells you to do. Be a good little developer, shut up, and if you want access to our Nintendo Switch 2, do you want your game to be on Nintendo Switch 2? Yeah, guess what? You're going to do what we tell you to. Because we're Nintendo, and you're just a developer.
The new software distribution methods we've introduced to accommodate the larger game data sizes on Switch 2 compared to Switch. Except game companies who are releasing games whose game data sizes aren't even that big are still using that method just to cheapen out on the physical media side of things, while screwing over customers when it comes to what the expectations are and what the advantages are of physical media, and leaving them with, again, the worst of both worlds, the worst parts of physical media and the worst.
I want to fight back against the idea of physical media. It's something that I thought about, and I think I put out a short on it a little while back. I actually held up my Fable copy here. I keep this over here, one of my favorite games from when I was a kid. So Fable 2, right here. I open this up, bam. I have a disc right here. The media itself is not physical. The media is digital. The storage device is physical. Okay? And I really think that we need to argue that games media that we buy, although it is digital media, we need to have a right to own the digital media on the storage device of our choice. Whether that be a local download to a hard drive, or whether that be on a disk, or whether that be on a flash drive, or whether that be on a game card. I should have a right to choose what storage device I have that media on. Games have always been a digital media. However, at one point in time, we used to be able to purchase the storage device with that digital media on it and keep that until that storage device degraded. No different than books and so on. One could say that books, right, is a physical storage device for a story. You know, the story is actually a mental medium. You could really get into the weeds here. But I want to get into the weeds here because these companies don't seem to understand what we're asking for. And eventually these companies go, well, but games have always been digital. The games have never been physical. And what you need to say is, no, you're right. The games are digital. But at one point in time, I used to be able to go out and buy a storage device with the digital media on it, and you couldn't take that away from me. Why do I not have that right anymore?
parts of digital media. And then they conclude with software can be released in various formats and will continue to work closely with software publishers on many fronts to ensure that they actively support our platform. So again, it's a very empty...
Our platform, Nintendo's platform, not your platform. You can upgrade the 2 Zelda Switch games for no additional cost. That's interesting.
Statement that basically says we're going to keep doing what we're doing, and game key cards basically will remain. Like, this is not something that Nintendo seems to intend to discontinue as a format. Now, some folks are saying that there might be some hope in the way that Nintendo has been sending out surveys about game key cards. And in those surveys, I've sent out 2 already. They do ask about specifically game key cards and physical media that require digital downloads. They basically ask here how much that influences your purchase decision. And the hope is that the vast majority of people who took the survey picked definitely would not buy, in the hopes that Nintendo gets the message. But also, the general masses don't really care because there's a lack of awareness of the advantages and disadvantages, the pros.
No, because they're all piggies. Feed me, feed me, feed me. Give me more. Just, I want to consume. It's the Xbox Game Pass model. If you listen to people talking about Xbox Game Pass and they go, well, but for just so many dollars a month, I can play all of the games. They don't care whether the games are good or not. They just want to feed their mental gluttony. They're pigs. We have entered the day and age where consumerism is so strong that mental gluttony is pervasive throughout our society. It's so bad. And people don't understand that just like drug addiction, entertainment addiction is the same thing. Addiction in general. And this is what they're hoping. They're hoping that you're so addicted that you just have to get that. Why do you think people went out and bought the Switch 2? Knowing how bad Nintendo is as a company. They had to go get that Switch 2 that day. Because that I gotta have it. I gotta have that game on that thing that I need to have it. I just gotta have it. I can't not have it. But Royce, you will own nothing and you will like it. Yeah, that's yeah, right.
And cons between, proper physical media and digital media, and then that in between of game key cards, and the way that gives you, again, the worst of both worlds. And so long as the masses just continue buying this stuff and none of this ultimately ends up being financially detrimental to Nintendo, as long as it continues to be an enthusiast issue, enthusiasts being like in the, minority of the general mass population, I get the sense that as long as Nintendo doesn't feel like they have an obligation or that it's impacting the company and the shareholders negatively, they'll just keep doing this, what is, for lack of better words, an anti-consumer practice, because they know they can get away with it, and because it's convenient, and because they don't really seem to care that much about the issue of games preservation and the idea of people feeling a semblance of ownership over the product that they purchased. Having access.
No. They are directly, see, and this is where he's so soft on this. It's not that they don't care. It's that they are actively working against the ownership. It's not that they don't care. It's that they're actively working against it. And this is why Yang, I've been subscribed to him for a long time. I watch him. I pop him from time to time when he covers a story, because I haven't seen anybody else really cover this one. And that's why I like Yang, because I think he does stories that I don't hear from a lot of other people. Good for him. He needs to actually say it. It's not that they don't care about games preservation. It's not that they don't care about customer ownership. It's that they are actively working against you. They want your money for nothing in return. I think it was Legendary Drops who said a few weeks ago, if they could figure out a way for you to just give them money and they would give you nothing else in return, God, that would be the best thing on the planet for these people.
To the products that they bought for as long as they take care of the products that they bought. I guess only time will tell how this game key card situation will proceed moving forward. I get the sense that we're transitioning further and further into a fully digital era, and we have seen the consequences of that already, with plenty of games having just completely disappeared from the face of the planet, and with movements like Stop Killing Games, which recently garnered a lot of traction and seems to be doing really well and seems to be headed towards legislation, being there to essentially warn and to essentially create rules and laws that will allow the prevention of not only the loss of games on a permanent level, but also, respecting the basic concept of commerce, where when you spend money on a product, you should have autonomy over your ability to access that product.
Okay, see, I like what he said there. That was a very, very well said. That was very well said by him. Respecting commerce.
And use that product. And so we'll see how all of this will play out as time passes. But so far, game key cards have proven to be woefully unpopular among enthusiasts, and the disadvantages of that format continue to reveal themselves as more time passes. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Nintendo Switch 2.
So I like how he's covering this. I wish he'd have a little bit more teeth about it. But here is the link if you guys want to go and check out Young. Yeah, I mean, he's much bigger than I am. You guys have probably already heard of him. I do like a lot of what he has to say when it comes to games, and he does cover a lot of stories that don't get out there a lot.